Welcome students for online classes. So today we'll start with a new chapter under statistics part, that is chapter 3, organization of data. In this chapter we'll study about classification of data, variables and frequency distribution. So the topics which we'll study in this session are classification of data and variables. Okay. So, in the earlier chapters, that is in the first and second chapter, first chapter we studied about the basics of statistics, how it will imply to economics. Under the second chapter, we studied how we collect data from the various sources in the economy. So, in this third chapter, we will study how we will organize or how we will classify the collected data. So, in the earlier chapter, we had collected data maybe from the primary source, maybe with the help of secondary source, that with the help of the survey or the census. So whatever we collected in that particular chapter, maybe for example the people or the officers or the investigators went out for the collection of data at this particular point of time, that is known as the raw data which is not been classified. So in this chapter we will study how we will classify the data based on the raw data which we got in the earlier chapter. So the classification of data can be done. There is two types of classification data. First is raw data and second one is classified data. So first one is, what is raw data? The collected data which is in unorganized form is called as raw data. In the earlier chapter we studied, we collect the information from the census or the sample survey. So at this point of time, what will we do? We just collect the data. We will not classify the data based upon maybe the area, maybe any kind of situation or something. So what happened under raw data? What is raw data? The data which is not classified or the data which is not in a proper order, that is known as raw data. So now the main thing which we will study under this chapter is about the classification of data. So what is classified data? The process of grouping into different classes or subclasses according to their characteristics is called as classified data. Say for example, now I will go, as I am an investigator, I will be going to the census operation. So at this point of time, what will I do? I'll go to their homes, I will ask about their family background, I will ask about their working criteria, I will be asking about their salary. So what will I do? I will be roughly writing in one of the sheet. So I will be getting a format of a sheet where I will roughly write all these things. So once I write all these things, once I go back after the census, what will I do? I segregate all these things. Maybe how many siblings are there, I will segregate that in one particular, segregate or divide that particular in one particular format or one, for example, format in the sense, maybe I will be having many Excel sheets. So as under computer science, you might study what is Word, what is Excel, what is PowerPoint presentation, all these things. So I will be segregating all these things. Maybe the gender, maybe how many males are there, how many female are there, what is the income level, whether is it highly, or whether is their income level increasing 1 lakh, or whether they increase income level is decreasing of 1 lakh. All these things I will segregate in one of my sheet, so that in future once I go through all these things, I will get to know what had happened in this particular situation. That is known as classification of data. So how do you do the grouping? The grouping can be made based upon the similarities or resemblance. Similarities in the sense, as I told, for example, if I take the gender, I have one whole sheet will be based on gender. House number 1, how many male are there, how many female are there. In the same way, house number 2, how many male are there, how many female are there. All these things which will I get into one particular sheet or one particular format, where I will get to know about all these things easily. So that is known as classification of data. So why do we do classification of data? So the objectives of classification of data is to present the facts in a simpler form. In a simpler form, in the sense, for example, I will take the example of your class. So there will be a strength of 30 students in that, where 14 students will be boys and the 16 students will be girls. So how will I get to know how many boys are there, how many girls are there within a glance of time? I will not get once I see how many students are there in a class. In spite of that, what will the other clerk in our school do? They will segregate how many boys are there in a class, how many students, or what is the strength of the first PU commerce class. So in this way I will get to know easily. So while taking attendance or while taking account, I will get to know that the maximum students they are in my class are 30 members. So how many of them are present, how many of them are absent? So classification of data will help or make things in a simpler form. Next thing is about to study the relationship between the groups. Relationship in the sense, you will get to know what kind of groups are there in the economy. Groups in the sense, for example, when I take into consideration your class itself, what is the lower students who will score only 10%, the student who will score 100%. So I will segregate the students so that I will give main priority to the students who will not study. So these are kind of the classification which can I do in the basic criteria. Next thing is to eliminate unnecessary data. Unnecessary data in the sense, for example, the next day, today you will be coming alone, the next day if you get your friend who is not admitted to a class, at that time it will be very difficult for me to understand. So classification of data, by getting to know what is the strength of your class, by getting to know how much male are there, how much female are there, what will happen, it will eliminate the unnecessary data. Here in this example, the unnecessary data will be your friend who will coming to the class, who will be not know, where the teachers will not be knowing who is he. So at this point of time, we will either call his parents, or we can either make him stand outside. This is about the classification. Next thing is about to condense the data in the meaningful information. So what does the word condense mean? Condense means in limitation or decreasing the value, so that we will get to know the value in a better way. For example, in spite of counting how many students are there in the class every day, what the other thing we do, we stand, we call the attendance. So what happens at that point of time, we will get to know how many students are present, how many students are absent, in spite of getting to know which student is absent in this particular day, which student is absent in the next day. So the last thing is about classification facilitates easy tabulation of data. In the same way, I will even take the same example. So once I take attendance, what will I get to know? For example, if only 28 members are present out of 30 members, what will I do? I will automatically get that 2 members are absent. So this is the classification, or this is the easier process of making the classification of data from the raw data which we collect, which is not classified. So now we will study about the types of classification of data. So these are the 4 various types of classification of data. First one is chronological or temporal classification. So as the name itself tells, chronological order. So it should be in a particular order which will be based on time. So the definition is classification of data on the basis of time is called as chronological or temporal classification. So the data here under the chronological order should be either in the ascending order, or it should be under the descending order. For example, here I have given an example of the population, maybe based on the year. So I have taken 10 years apart. Why have I taken 10 years apart? Because the census is made only once in 10 years. So the based on that particular year, how the population is been increasing, that is the basic example for chronological or temporal classification. So the next thing is about geographical or spatial classification. So what, as the name itself tells, geographical, it means a locality, or it might be a area or a country or the whole universe. So what happens, the classification of data on the basis of locality, country, city, village, etc. is called as geographical or spatial classification. So The major example for this is I have taken into consideration the states and the production which is being made. So the states Delhi, Punjab, Tamil Nadu, and the production is 1000, 3500, and 2000. This will be based on the uh, equipments or the machinery which they use for the production process. So geographical classification is basically made upon based upon the locality or based upon the area. Okay, next thing, qualitative classification. It is qualitative classification which will be based upon the not numerical terms, which is not based upon numerical terms, which is based upon the skill or which is based upon the appearance. That is known as qualitative classification, based upon the quality of a particular individual, maybe the behavior, all these things comes under the qualitative classification. So the meaning is classification of data on the basis of qualitative characteristic such as gender, literacy, etc. is called as qualitative classification. For example, I have taken the population. So a particular male or female's characteristics, we cannot measure those things in numbers. So whether the population is based upon married or unmarried, which I have taken into consideration. So the next thing is about quantitative classification. As the name itself tells, quantity, where I take into consideration or on the basis of the numericals or basis on the numbers. So the classification of data on the basis of quantitative characteristics such as height, weight, etc. is called as quantitative classification. So when I tell quantity, what will I do? Maybe for example, I need a kg of tomato, so that will be based upon the quantity. But what is about quality? Quality is based upon the standard of living or how you talk to other person, how you behave, all these under qualitative classification. But under quantitative classification, we see what is the kg, how many liters of petrol, we see the height of a particular person, we see the weight, all these things comes under the quantitative classification. So these were about the four classification of the classified data, how the classified data can be even more classified based upon these four characteristics. Now the next thing under this session, we will study about the variables. So what does the word variable mean? It means that any particular thing which changes from time to time, that is known as variable. So when I talk about classification of data, we merely talk about the numbers, we merely talk about what is the production, what was the population, what is the national income, what is per capita income, what was the GDP in that year. All these things we study under classification of data or under statistics. Basically we study about the numbers. So how the numbers will affect the economy, we will study about that. So what does variable tell? How the value will change from time to time, that is known as the variables. So say for example, I will take an example of production process. So last year I had a production of 100 tons. So but this year I might there might, because of some issues, maybe because of the rain, limited rain, or maybe because of heavy rain, my crops got rotten or there was no proper rain. So because of this, my production process will reduce to 95% tons. So this is known as variables, where there will be no constant process. In spite of that, there will be fluctuations or there will be changes in the particular economy based upon the time. So under variables there are of two types, continuous variable and discrete variable, where continuous variable mean a quantity which can assume all fractional or integral values within a specified range. So what does this mean? It means that the values which we take into consideration will be of the many values. Many values we will take into consideration, that is known as continuous variable. For example, I have taken here the age of the people and the number of people. So the aged person from 0 to 10 are only 25 members, and the person from 10 to 20 are 30%. But here I am not specifically telling that only the age of 9, that those are 25, only the age of 10 they are 30. I am not telling that. I am ranging the person between 0 to 10, that is there are 25 number of people. I can even imagine that the age of 5 members can be 10 members. I can even imagine that the age of 10 can be 20 members. So this is known as continuous data or continuous variable, where the variables will be fluctuating based upon the numbers taken. So now I come to the discrete variables. Now discrete variables are those which are exact, where there is no continuity in variable, which is exact in number and are not normally fractions, that is known as the discrete variable. So as you can see in the example, there are number of children and number of families. So I have taken here the exact numbers, say 2, 3, 4 and 5. But when I come to the continuous variable, what I had taken, I was taking a ranging number from 0 to 10 or 10 to 20. Sorry, you can even take 10 to 15, you can even take 10 to 11, anything. So but under continuous variable, there should not be a exact value as we have under the discrete variable, that is known as discrete variable. The discrete variable can take only the certain value and jumps from one value to another value and are not continuous. So here I can even write 2, 7, 13, 14. So these are not the continuous variables, I can jump from one number to another number, so there is no continuity. But when I come to the continuous variables, what happens, there is 0 to 10, 10 to 20. So there should be a continuity between one number from the above number to the below number, so that is known as continuous variable. And the discrete variable are the variable which have the exact value and their exact frequency in the sense the value corresponding to this particular number of children, which is the frequency. Here the frequency is 35, the value corresponding to the value number of children, that is known as frequency. So this was about the variable. So these are the two types under variable. First one is about continuous variable and second one is about discrete variable. So the assignment part, what is raw data? Write a note on classification of data, mention the types of variables and explain it. Thank you, students.